This may not be the typical love story we are used to hearing. It's not about drama or blame, but about the quiet realities that often live beneath the surface of fame and affection. Sometimes, behind the laughter and the luxury that we all see, there is a silent struggle that says more than words ever could. Her name is Chioma David, though many people know her as Chioma Adeleke, Chef Chi, Davido's wife, Davido's assurance, or whatever other name you might know her with. But beyond the title, beyond the smiles that we see and the public displays of affection, lies something deeper, something many women can relate to, which is the emotional cost of being with someone who doesn't respect boundaries. Everyone knows Davido, the music, the success, the charm, but this isn't his story. This is about her, the woman who has stood through love, heartbreak, and humiliation, all while keeping silent in a world that watches everything she does, every single step she takes. Chioma has been called understanding, loyal, and strong, but strength doesn't mean she doesn't feel pain. Because no matter how calm a woman looks on the outside, no one is immune to emotional pain, especially when love begins to hurt more than it heals. So in this video, we're not judging her choices, we're trying to understand them. We're asking, what makes someone stay through betrayal? What makes a person stay in a situation that hurts? What does it mean to keep loving someone who keeps breaking the rules of love? Let's go back to where it all began. How Chioma met Davido and how their fairy tale started. Before the scandals, before the headlines, before the tragedies that would later test their bond, there was once a love story that looked like something out of a dream. Chioma Avril Rowland met David Adeleke, better known as Davido, long before the world started to call him OBU. They both attended Babcock University, where Davido was studying music and Chioma was pursuing a degree in economics. Back then, Davido was already from a wealthy family, but he was still finding his footing in the music industry. Fame hasn't completely changed his life yet, and perhaps that was what made their connection so genuine at first. Years later, Davido himself admitted that meeting Chioma before his fame was one of the best things that ever could have happened to him. In his words, if he hadn't met her early enough, he might have struggled to trust any woman who came into his life after success, because he would believe that they only wanted him for his money or fame. So when he met Chioma, the soft-spoken, calm, grounded angel, it felt like finding peace amid the chaos of his rising career. As his fame grew, so did their love. Soon the world began to notice. Chioma wasn't just another girl beside a superstar. She became part of his identity. When Davido sang Assurance in 2018 and publicly declared her his one true love, gifting her a Porsche and dedicating a whole music video to her, Chioma's name instantly became a household one. To many, it was every woman's fantasy, love, luxury, and loyalty, all wrapped into one public spectacle. The internet crowned her Chef Chi, a name that started from her love for cooking and later became a brand built around Davido's affection. She was no longer just his girlfriend, she was the chosen one. For Chioma, it must have felt like a promise, a sense of security that all the glitz and chaos of fame couldn't touch. The man she loved had not only chosen her, but done so in front of the entire world. But beneath all the luxury, gifts, and public declarations, something subtle was happening. Something that looked like love but was quietly building a dangerous kind of emotional dependency. When love comes, wrapped in grand gestures, attention, and the whole world's applause, it becomes easy to mistake intensity for stability. And in those early years, Chioma's story felt like the proof that fairy tales could exist, until life began to test how real that fairy tale really was. Love can be beautiful, but sometimes it quietly demands more than anyone ever plans to give. When Chioma met Davido, she had her own dreams. She was a student at Babcock University, focused, quiet, and ambitious. She wanted to be a chef, not just a home cook. but a professional brand with her own restaurant, her own name and her own story. But slowly as the relationship with Davido grew, so did the weight of his world. The spotlight that followed him began to follow her too. What began as excitement, attending shows, traveling, being part of his life, gradually became her entire world. Somewhere between the concerts and private jets and the public assurance, Chioma's life stopped being hers alone. She dropped out of school. Her education, which was once a priority, faded into the background. Her career as a chef became a hashtag, Chef Chi, but not a reality. No restaurant, no brand, no identity beyond being Davido's woman. And maybe she didn't even notice it happening at first. That's how identity loss often begins, not in one big decision, but in 1,000 small compromises. Soon her entire public existence became tied to him. Her appearances, her fame, her name, everything revolved around Davido. In interviews, in music videos, even in casual mentions online, she wasn't Chioma Rowland anymore. She was Davido's Chioma. And while that might sound like affection to the public, for the person living it, it can become a slow erasure. When two lives begin to merge that deeply, it stops being partnership and starts becoming dependency. Her happiness became tied to his choices, her relevance to his fame, her peace to his loyalty. The tragedy of this kind of love is that it doesn't ask for your dreams. It takes them quietly, one by one, until there's nothing left that belongs only to you. And for Chioma, the price of being the chosen one was giving up the chance to be her own person. Sometimes losing yourself in love doesn't happen because you're weak. It happens because you believe in the version of love you were promised. You hold on, hoping that all the sacrifices will one day make sense. But when love becomes your entire identity, it quietly teaches you that your worth depends on someone else's presence. And that's where the danger begins. Because the moment that person falters, everything built around them starts to shake. When people talk about Davido and Chioma, they often start the story from the assurance era, the songs, the gifts, the smiles. But the real story didn't begin there. It started years earlier, quietly, when the signs were already showing. Back in 2013, long before Assurance became a national anthem, Chioma was already in Davido's life. He went on to say that he thanked God he met her earlier and all that kind of stuff because he wouldn't know who loved him and who didn't and who was after the money, all that stuff like that, But not long after, in 2014, after all this praise and all this talks of being in love with her, starting a relationship with her from 2013, not long after that, in 2014, a woman named Ayotomide Labinjo stepped forward, claiming she had a child for Davido, a girl she named Anu Oluwapo. She said it happened after a show in Ibadan. Davido completely denied this. He denied the woman and the child. Now, whether that story was true or not isn't the focus. The question is, what if it was? If Ayotomide's story was true, then a pattern had already begun. One Chioma either didn't see or chose to overlook. The pattern of a man who could not stay faithful, who could not respect boundaries, who could hurt and move on as though nothing happened. Okay, let's forget about that. Maybe it wasn't true. But then, a year later in 2015, history repeated itself. This time, it wasn't just a rumor and it wasn't any girl in the street. It was Sophia Momodu, niece of media mogul Dele Momodu. What was supposed to be a one-night fling during a show ended with the birth of Imade Adeleke, Davido's first acknowledged child. It wasn't love, it wasn't a relationship, it was a reckless decision that changed multiple lives. But for Chioma, what did this mean? It meant watching from the sidelines while the man she loved publicly navigated scandal after scandal, while the world called him young and wild, and she quietly waited, believing he would grow out of it. Remember, he said their relationship began in 2013. So our theories are based on when their relationship started. So all these things were happening while he was supposedly in a relationship with Chioma. But patterns don't just disappear, they repeat, louder, messier, and more painful each time. Shortly after all this, in 2015, came the year 2017. Another woman, Amanda, based in the US, had Hailey, Davido's second daughter, and by then, the pattern was no longer hidden. It was public. The world could see it. The trail of women, the children, the apologies, and the many excuses. But Chioma stayed. Maybe because living didn't seem like an option anymore. By 2018, Davido made a grand gesture by releasing the song Assurance, and this is where he publicly declared Chioma the one and only truly chosen one. That song, A Car and a Promise, for the first time he made her the centerpiece of his world. Chioma, my lover, he sang, and the world fell in love with their love story. It was the fairy tale everyone wanted to believe. But fairy tales are just that, stories. Barely a year later, in 2019, while the music video was still trending, another scandal surfaced. This time, it was Larissa Yasmin Lorenko, a London-based model. Rumors spread that she was pregnant for Davido, and like clockwork, the same pattern replayed: denial, silence, distraction, and eventually acceptance. She gave birth to Dawson in 2020. The same man who promised forever was again entangled in another controversy, another woman, another child. By now, Chioma had become a symbol of patience. Nigerians praised her, the quiet one, the understanding wife, the strong woman. But no one asked the real questions. How does a person hold so much pain and still smile? How does it feel to be constantly reminded that the world knows your partner doesn't respect you? What does it do to your self-worth when betrayal becomes routine? Even if you forgive, even if you move on, nobody is immune to pain. There's no amount of love that makes humiliation easy. No amount of money that makes betrayal less sharp. While the world was still talking about these scandals, Chioma got pregnant. It shocked everyone. For years, fans had admired her restraint. She wasn't like the others. She was different. She was supposed to wait for the ring, for the wedding, for the fairy tale ending. But love, or maybe hope, led her down the same path. In 2019, she gave birth to Davido Adeleke, Davido's very first son. The internet celebrated it like a victory, but for some, it felt like defeat, another dream deferred. She had become what she probably never planned to be, a baby mama. But maybe in her mind, this was love proving itself. Maybe this was her way of showing loyalty, believing that motherhood would bring stability. But patterns don't change because of love or loyalty or even children. And as the circle continued, Chioma's silence became louder. Not because she didn't see, but because sometimes you get so used to the pain, it becomes normal. You just turn a blind eye. There are few things more painful than waiting for a promise to become real. For years, Chioma Rowland was the woman with the ring, the one who had been chosen, yet not chosen completely. Davido had promised in 2019, around the time she was carrying his child. The world watched in excitement as Assurance, once a song, seemed ready to become a wedding story. But after the cameras faded and the applause died down, there was no wedding, just silence, postponement, and a slow drifting of attention. Chioma had given birth to their son, a beautiful boy who symbolized hope, forgiveness, and the idea that love could still win. Yet, the ceremony that was meant to seal it all never came. Instead, there were whispers, more rumors, new names, the same circle repeating itself. The internet turned cruel, painting her as the patient one, the woman who waited too long, the girlfriend who became a baby mama and still waited for a ring. Her love story, once seen as enviable, quietly turned into a cautionary tale. In a world where everything is public, her humiliation was too. Every new woman linked to Davido reopened an old wound. Every rumor of a new child dragged her back into the storm. And though none of us truly know what happened behind closed doors, a man who moved through women as though it was endless, and a woman who held on as though love could fix what repetition kept breaking. There are moments when they reportedly went their separate ways, times when both of them seemed to live apart, exploring different worlds. For Chioma, those moments were opportunities for reflection, for rediscovering herself outside of Davido's orbit. But somehow, the pull always brought them back together. Meanwhile, Davido's name kept appearing alongside other women. One of his baby mamas, Amanda, who had given birth to Hailey in 2017, was rumored in 2023 to have welcomed another child for him. While that claim has never been confirmed, he added a familiar rhythm, the same rhythm that had been echoing since his earlier days: affection, infidelity, apology, followed by reunion. And through it all, Chioma stayed. People asked why. Some say love, others said loyalty, but perhaps it was something deeper, a kind of emotional investment that becomes hard to walk away from. When someone has been part of your story for years, even the pain starts to feel like home. But then came the tragedy that changed everything. In October 2022, their son Ifeanyi Adeleke drowned in the family's Lagos home, a loss that stunned an entire nation. It was the kind of grief that words could not hold. For Chioma, it was more than heartbreak. It was the collapse of the one thing that made all their sacrifices feel worth it. And yet, even in grief, culture demanded something. According to the Igbo custom, a man who has not paid his partner's bride price cannot claim the body of her child. The child, in the eyes of tradition, belongs to the woman's family, not the man. And so, in those quiet, tragic days that followed their son's death, Davido reportedly completed the marriage rites, not with music, not with a celebration, but with mourning. The wedding that the world waited for came not with a song, but with pain. It was a union born out of necessity, a desperate act to fulfill cultural duty, to claim his son for burial. It was, in a sense, a marriage of obligation. That moment forces a painful question. Was this truly the culmination of love or the weight of responsibility? For 3 years, Davido had not married her while their son lived. For 3 whole years, she had worn the ring without the vows. But when death came and culture required him to act, he finally did what love had long delayed. It was not the wedding Chioma had dreamed of. It was not the love story anyone imagined. Perhaps he did love her. Perhaps, he still does. But love without commitment breeds confusion. And commitment born from tragedy carries a shadow that no joy can easily erase. What do you call a marriage that begins in mourning? Is it love or the illusion of security? For Chioma, it might be both, and maybe that's the most haunting truth of all. A lot of people expected her to reject the marriage, but she went on to accept the marriage. From the outside, Chioma Rowland's life looks perfect. The husband, the name, the fame, the lifestyle. To many, she's the woman who won, the one who waited through the storms and finally got her ring. But behind every photo, every carefully curated moment of happiness, there is a quiet weight of endurance, a story many Nigerian women know too well. Chioma has become the symbol of understanding wife, the woman who forgives endlessly, who keeps her silence no matter the humiliation. She is praised for her maturity, her composure, her grace. But what people forget is that silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes, that same silence is just a survival mode. Psychologically, emotional endurance has its limits. When love becomes an anchor instead of a comfort, it starts to drown the soul. Over the years, Chioma has faded further into Davido's shadow. Once a promising chef with her own dreams, she no longer seems to pursue her passion publicly. Her career, her identity, her voice, all swallowed by the need to maintain peace, to hold the image together. Why doesn't she speak up? Maybe it's fear of losing the only stability she has ever known. Maybe it's shame, the embarrassment of walking away after years of defending the man she stayed for. Maybe it's love, or the addiction to the emotional highs and lows that often come with it. And maybe, just maybe, it's the societal pressure to appear as the good woman. Because in our culture, women are trained to endure. They are told that love is sacrifice, that patience is virtue, that silence is dignity. But no human being is built to carry emotional pain forever. The truth is, the longer emotional wounds stay hidden, the more dangerous they become. Sometimes they don't explode publicly, sometimes they turn inward. They become depression, resentment, detachment, or quiet resignation. The kind that makes you smile in public but feel empty when the light goes off. And that is what makes this story a ticking time bomb. Not because Chioma will explode in rage, but because no one, not even the strongest, can live in emotional suppression forever. Look at the pattern. Look at how it repeats. Just like a Regina Daniels, whose life looked like a dream until the cracks showed. Just like Annie Dibia, women who smile through the pain, wear silence like an armor, and keep enduring until they can't anymore. The world praises them for staying, but never asks what it's costing them. In Davido's case, the pattern hasn't stopped. As recently as 2024, an American woman came out publicly claiming to be pregnant for him. While the story remains unconfirmed, he adds another line to an already familiar script, one that raises question about how long Chioma can truly live this way. Because the truth is simple, you cannot heal in the same environment that keeps breaking you. Every act of forgiveness chips away at your peace. Every public scandal reopens a private wound. And every silence, no matter how graceful, brings her closer to the breaking point. This is the quiet reality behind the glamorous photos. The fact that children keep popping up talks about the fact that her health is not even considered. This is sex that is had without any form of protection. So we're not just talking about the mental toll that this has on a human being, but the health implications. A woman who is praised for her patience, yet punished for her love. When love becomes a cage, the only way to breathe is to stop loving. But can she? Or has she given too much of herself to even remember how? Because the truth about ticking time bombs is, you can never tell the time they're gonna explode. Sometimes they can go off quietly, right inside the heart. But sometimes, the explosion can be public and very loud. This is the kind of love story society often romanticizes. The woman who stayed, the man who finally came back, the marriage that rose from tragedy. But beneath the hashtags and fairy tale captions lies a painful truth we rarely confront. We have normalized women's suffering as a proof of loyalty. We tell them to endure, to forgive, to stay, even when staying means losing themselves piece by piece. We applaud them for silence, call it grace, and forget that silence is sometimes the loudest cry for help. Maybe Chioma's story isn't just about Davido. Maybe it's about every woman who's been taught that love is endurance, that pain is part of the package, that being chosen, even at your breaking point, is still something to celebrate. But love should never feel like punishment. And the kind of peace that costs your voice isn't peace. it's surrender. So before we praise the woman who stays, maybe we should start asking why she had to.